intimacy, if you will, is this, what do you call it,
Outercourse. Instead of intercourse, I
outer
call it
course?
outercourse.
You know,
It's
I
a
think it's
term we need
very.
to know. Thank you so much for joining us today on Second Act TV. Once again, I'm so happy to welcome Robert Manni back to our program, the author of The Guys Guide to Love, and of course, the host of Guys Guy Radio and Television. Robert, thank you so much for joining me again.
My pleasure to be here. Love being here, Silka.
We've been talking a lot about, new trends, especially after this pandemic when it comes to dating and intimacy and just relationships, period. I came across this article, and again, this is a Robert article. This is a Robert discussion. And I think it was, Cosmopolitan Magazine. And so it caters a little bit more to the younger audience. So let's see how much is tried and true, and what is it that we can learn from this. So it says here, this is what dating will look like in 2022. And what they did was they interviewed representatives from like the big dating sites, from some of the quote unquote toy manufacturers. So people that have a lot of input into what they think relationships are going to look like. And the first one here, I love the title, Outercourse. And it says here, Outercourse, a definite sex trend for 2022, the catch-all term for forms of non-penetrative sex.
Well, maybe, coming out of 2 years of the pandemic and dating with a hazmat suit on, or finding one that's swab worthy, if you will, it's understandable that penetration has been a little bit out of reach for some folks, because there's been a lot of kind of dating and getting to know each other online, remotely, and so much of our lives has gone remotely. So I think the idea of penetration has kind of taken a back seat over the last couple of years. So if that translates to now when people are getting back together, that another layer of intimacy, if you will, is this, what do you call it?
Outercourse. Instead of intercourse, I call it outercourse. It's a term we need to know.
It's timely, and it fits what's going on right now. So listen, my bottom line when I hear new terms about dating, whether it's breadcrumbing or this or that, it's there's not enough love in the world, and there's a lot of universals when it comes to relationships and intimacy and communication, and men and women and men and women and whatever. So I always boil it down to is there's not enough love in the world, so whatever works, as long as both people are consenting and having a good time, and why not?
Well, I think it's great for especially our generation. I'm all for it. Outercourse sounds good to me. Here's an interesting what you said about getting to know each other online. WanderLove, also a good term, but is again, this is predicted to be a big hit. And it's essentially the code for holiday romance. However, they're now predicting that holiday romances or long distance are more apt to turn into relationships.
So this would be you go on a trip and you hook up with a stranger, get to know somebody who's staying at the same hotel or whatever, and you become intimate, and then maybe keep it going after you both return to your lives. Is that it?
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
Hey, listen, there's nothing wrong with that, and I think that's just a new term for something that's been going on for a long time. Sometimes you leave it where you leave it in Vegas, so to speak, and sometimes you bring it back. And hey, if you really had a good time and can see a future in getting to know this person and have some type of relationship, whether it be friendship or you start with a long distance relationship, who knows what can happen. I think the bottom line is that everybody nowadays, we need to keep an open mind, because things are changing so quickly. And if we limit ourselves to the old rules, we're really holding ourselves back from what could be a sea change in terms of how we live and the possibilities that are there for us across the board in every aspect of our lives, but most importantly in the area of romance, intimacy, and love.
Yeah, especially for the whole online dating. I mean, and we've done shows on this too. Is the idea of a long distance relationship? I think it's great. I think one, it opens up your dating pool or your potential pool for romance so much further, and I think this speaks to that. Yeah, this is something that could work. So again, don't discount the long distance relationships. There could be more
Right.
to it here than we think. And here another one right out of the pandemic, according to Bumble, is consciously single. It's like the opposite of single shaming. That we've learned that it's okay to be single.
Well, it sure is. I was single until I was 50, and I'm proud of it. And I know a lot of my friends had gotten married, and I would be kind of a third wheel sometimes, but I got to meet a lot of really cool people that I probably wouldn't have met. I got to make a lot of friends. I got to meet a lot of tremendous women. I was in New York City, so it's really important to get out there and meet a lot of people. And I think consciously single is a good thing. And it has to work for you. So wherever you are, whatever age you are, whatever stage of life you're in, and it doesn't have to be based on a chronological age. It could be just what's happening with you. If you decide you want to be consciously single, there's nothing wrong with that. And that doesn't mean if you're a woman that you're just sleeping around. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that you want to have time to yourself to develop yourself and work on some things. And the same thing with guys also. But there can't be, it has to be an equal playing field, though. It has to work for women and for men. And there shouldn't be any shaming about being consciously single for either.
Right. Well, and exactly. And we've had to explain for so long why we're single. Like there's something wrong with it. So I love that
Exactly.
trend. I love that trend. Love it. Here's something I find. I actually am going to do a whole segment on this. And I've already have somebody lined up. Emotional equality. Kind of a weird name, but basically 83% of, well, here, this happened to be Hinge. So and it is a younger audience. Again, that's why I'm wondering, how does this apply to our demographic? They want to only date people, or they look for people who admit to being in therapy. That being in therapy or being open to being in therapy is almost like a must have. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's so much divisiveness that's happening in our world because I think with the election, if you were for Trump versus somebody who was for Biden, a new relationship it was so hot and heavy that it's a factor. So I think two people in therapy have some common ground. So that's a good thing. Where that goes, will it be two people kind of unraveling themselves in front of each other and become more of an issue? I don't know. Every situation is different. But if it's a common ground thing, it's like two people getting together, they both love golf. And that's some common ground. It's something for them to talk about. That's a common interest they have. They both are in therapy, great. Or neither of them was in therapy, fine. So whenever you can find some common ground, it's always a good thing. But I don't think you want to turn it into a two-way therapy session because everybody's situation is different. And a lot of it's personal. And I think I would recommend that folks who are doing this need to be careful as to who they're selecting to share their innermost secrets with.
Yeah, really good point. I don't know how I feel about this one. I know there's so much focus on emotional health, and I understand. I totally agree that that's important. To me, there's still something, you go to a therapist when there's something wrong. And I guess we all have something wrong, but to making that a requirement of who you're dating, I don't know. It's an interesting discussion. Like I said, we're going to have a whole segment on this with somebody that really believes in it.
Cool.
Well, you just brought it up. Politics versus romance. That big trend based on what we just went through, that we got to be on the same page or this isn't going to work. What do you think?
Well, I think in the past it would have been okay, where mom's a Democrat and dad's a Republican or something. But now it's gotten into this personal. It's gotten personal, where if you're on one side or the other side, it becomes personal very quickly. People aren't listening to each other. They're not looking for the common ground. They're like, you're a snowflake or you're a racist. And very quickly it gets personal. And the same thing with the pandemic, where people are in terms of mandates and things like that, where very quickly we get away from the data and the facts and we start pointing fingers at the person and criticizing them. And I think that's where the comfort of finding somebody who's in has the same political affiliations with you may make things easier because it's just one less mountain that we need to climb.
Yeah, I agree. I really agree. Yes, you can. I'm sure there's ways to make it work. It would be difficult, like you said, in this climate. I think I wouldn't shut it down completely, but depending on, again, to your point, how that's handled, how whatever you believe is handled by that person can be miserable in a relationship. I've seen it, and I've seen others that work. So again, interesting observation.
Hmm.
Here's another one. hetero hetero flexibility. This definitely comes, I think, from from the younger generation, where homosexuality or whatever is just no longer shocking. And don't mean to imply there's anything wrong with it, but is that really a trend? Would somebody who isn't homosexual or who isn't heterosexual, would you be open in that way? What do you think?
Well, I think a lot of this has been going on for a long time, but now more and more it's becoming to the surface and more acceptable. And it's not something that people would stay, you don't have to stay in a closet anymore. But I think the how somebody responds in terms of, are they straight, are they heterosexual, are they flexible in that area? That's a personal decision, and nobody knows that but the individual. So I go back again to if there's not enough love in the world. So whatever works. I've interviewed thruples. I've interviewed, gay, straight, bi. To me, it doesn't matter. If they're good people and they want to do good things in the world, more power to them. That's an individual taste. So I think it just things are coming with the younger crowd. The things are coming to the surface quickly. They're more acceptable. I don't think they're quite as um, narrow-minded as maybe our generation has been and had been taught by our elders.
Yeah, yeah. I think the back and forth, like homosexuality, hetero, whatever, is the back and forth that I find interesting. That I don't know. I don't know if that's our generation will always look at that a little differently, or it's just something exciting, maybe. uh,
You know what? I think for guys, for my generation, it took a while for men at least, to get kind of used to that. And now I think it's good. It's cool. But I think a lot of guys from my generation went through like not really wrapping their head around the whole, you know, you could be straight, you can be with a man and be with a woman. That would mean you're gay, and that's not necessarily the case. And it's a tricky area for guys who are straight and grew up that way to like wrap their heads around. That said, I've never been interested in dating another guy. I prefer women for intimacy. Not even prefer. That's been my lane, and that's cool. That should be cool too. Not everybody has to date both sexes. It's like whatever works for you should be fine. And I go by what my heart tells me, and what my body tells me, and what my brain tells me, and what my intuition tells me, and what feels right for me. And I think that's how the decision should be made by everybody. Whatever works for you, if you're not hurting anybody else, and you're putting love in the world, that's cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it'll be interesting to see. There's just so many different types of relationships that are developing that it's not all black and white anymore. Or marriage is the ultimate success of a relationship and all that. So I find all this very interesting. I think I'm going to have some more segments on that. So anyway, we'll do that another time. And then this one I think is a great one. That the untyping, also a good name, that people are realizing that going with your type or sticking to a type is just not working. That, well, sometimes it works, I suppose, but if it's not working for you, look at what you're attracting or what your type is, and then open, maybe date outside of your type.
I think that's very wise, and I think too many people get into whether it's, a lot of times the ladies have the list, and kind of the list keeps getting longer, and you have to boil that down to some must-haves, and it should be about values. It shouldn't be necessarily about physical attributes or, race, creed, color, and all of that kind of stuff, or height, or how much money they have, but that happens. I think dating out of your type is a really good thing because I've found in my own personal experience that I've had types in my mind, but yet I ended up dating women who were not that type at all. I had great relationships, great times, and it opened me up to the fact that what really matters in a relationship is that if you can connect from an emotional frequency, if you will, and it's even like with sex. Sometimes the first time you are intimate with somebody, it's not the greatest, but it can blossom into something incredible. People have to become, and I think it's a necessity to survive nowadays and not implode, to become more flexible and be more open about so many areas in our lives, because otherwise if your lane gets too narrow, it's going to really squeeze you and you're not going to be very comfortable, because the world is changing faster and faster in a lot of ways, and we have to be open-minded to it. And that becomes more and more important in the areas of dating, relationship, intimacy, and love.
Yeah. Well, and let's end on this one, which is, I think it's positive too. Hinge found this, that it was if you're in a situationship, we had we had that term on a podcast with Trevor, that you really don't know what you're in, that the situationship is going out the door, that people really want relationships, and they're calling it relationship go-getters. That yes, we want to be in a relationship, and if we can't define it, then on to the next one that will work for us.
Well, I think if you just live it, you live the relationship, and if you're both, I don't know if you have to have a conversation and a contract that says this is what our relationship is. If you need to have that conversation, we'll have the conversation if things are unclear. That's perfectly fair. But I think really living it is what's important, not just defining it, because definitions can change. But if you're living it and you're both happy and you're both respecting one another, then the situation becomes a relationship if it's being handled with respect by both parties.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Robert, thank you. As always, I love talking with you. We'll link to all your information, to your book, to your podcast. Subscribe to Robert's YouTube channel. And is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Well, I always like to say there's not enough love in the world, so I use that as a barometer for making decisions. And also, most importantly, when it comes to love, the most important person to love, you have to start with yourself. And if you love yourself, you'll be in a much better position to love other people.
Perfect. Thank you, Robert. We'll see you next time on Second Act TV.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. The button is right over here. Just click on through to YouTube, and when you see the little bell right next to the subscribe button, hit that too. We'll notify you every time we launch a new video. See you next time.